Quotes of your life. Quotes of your life. Keep Washo.
What will be the quotes of your life? That's what I'd like all of you to really think about deeply today. Now, by show of hands, how many of you here have heard at least one quote in your life that's made you laugh or stop and think? Exactly, we all have. Isn't it amazing how quotes can be so powerful and say so much in so little? For example, here's a famous quote that makes you both laugh and think deeply at the same time, given to us by one of the smartest people on the planet, Albert Einstein. He brought us the theory of relativity. He said this, and I quote, "Put your hand on the stove, hot stove for a minute, it feels like an hour. Sit with a pretty woman for an hour, and it seems like a minute." That's relativity. It's all relative, right? In today's speech, I'd like to take all of you on a journey with me through history and time to share 3 famous quotes that really have changed the world. The first quote really changed and marked an important point in civilization. The second quote helped England win the war against Germany in World War II. The last quote comes from a man whose words changed America forever. And I'd like to conclude on one point. I'm asking you all to think about your life and what will be the quotes of your life. So let's begin. Let's take you on this journey and bring you all the way back to the 1960s. This was a time when our nation was at war. It was a Cold War between the United States and Russia. And it was a race to see who was stronger, faster, more superior. And President John F. Kennedy, he went to Congress in 1961, and he proclaimed a goal. And that goal was to be the first to land a man on the moon before anybody else. Fast forward 8 years later, and sure enough, in 1969, the Apollo 11 mission landed the first humans on the moon. And that famous astronaut that you all know, Neil Armstrong, smart group, he got out of that lunar landing and he set foot on the moon. An amazing, glorious moment for the whole world. Everyone was tuned in on their TVs, the radio. You could hear a pin drop. And that's when he spoke these now famous words.
And one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That's right. He said that was just one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And this one quote, 11 simple words, spoke a powerful achievement for the whole world. And think about this. I bet you Neil Armstrong lived his entire life for this one moment. And now this quote, his quote, left a footprint on our universe forever. With that, think about your life. What's going to be the quote of your life? Now, before we move on to our next example, I want to share with you a funny quote regarding landing a man on the moon. When the famous writer George Bernard Shaw was asked, what did he think we'd find on the moon? He said this, and I quote, "I don't know if there's men on the moon, but if there are, they must be using the earth as a lunatic asylum." Let's move forward to our next journey here. I'm going to bring you back further to the 1940s. And I'm going to introduce you one of the world's greatest leaders and communicators of all time. It's the famous Mr. Winston Churchill. And his famous quote comes during a time when England in the 40s was being bombed severely by Germany's Air Force during the Battle of Great Britain. Mr. Churchill went and visited these very select few Air Force pilots who were risking their lives around the clock, fighting up in the sky, trying to save millions of civilians below. And Mr. Churchill saw these dead and wounded Air Force pilots, and his heart broke. And he spoke this very emotional quote.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
And it's amazing, ladies and gentlemen, how 17 simple words can speak of volume, of honor, glory, and gratitude for that a whole nation owed these select few pilots. Doesn't that inspire you? Because of these words, England went on to win the war. So with that, think about your life. What will be the quotes of your life? So So let's move on to our very last example today. But before I do, I want to share with you a true story about Winston Churchill. It gives you a famous, funny quote. This is great. See, he was not only an amazing leader and orator, but Mr. Churchill was also known to be very funny and witty. He was at this Parliament party, having a few drinks, and this one Parliament woman who did not like him, named Lady Ashford, came up to Winston, and she used to always pick on him. And she said this. She said, "Winston, if you were my husband, I'd put poison in your coffee." Winston quickly responded, "Ma'am, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." All right, let's move on to the last quote in our journey. I want to bring you forward now to the 1960s in America. And this is when America was going through social change and the civil rights movement was really peaking. And it was in 1963 when many people believed the best speech ever delivered was given, where 4 words uttered by one man forever changed our country.
I have a dream.
It was the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. And we remember so vividly and powerfully these select quotes where he said,
I have a dream.
that one day my 4 children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And remember his future vision to a day when he said, I look forward when all of God's children will be able to hold hands and sing, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thanks to Dr. Martin Luther King and his words, America changed forever. Does that not inspire you? Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'd like you to stop for a moment. Think of your life. What words are you going to leave behind? How do you want to be remembered? You don't have to be an astronaut. You don't have to be a world leader to say something that can change the world. We're all given the same 24 hours in a day, the same light, the same darkness, to say something that can make a huge difference, if not the world, even just an amazing, beautiful child. Even Forrest Gump left us with quotes we can remember, right? Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Like leading the final thought concept is known as living with the end in mind. We all know we're going to pass on one day. If you were to pass on and attend your own funeral, look down in your casket, look up and see all your loved ones around you. What would you want them to say about you? What words do you want to leave behind? And then use the moment we have right now to leave those special words to make that difference. What will be the quotes of your life? Accomplish it.